Happy Friday, welcome back to Drinking by My Shelf. My name is Emma and this is Balancing the Books. At the beginning of July, I had 46 unread books on my TBR, and as I do every month, I have been keeping track throughout the month of July of every book that came onto my TBR and every book that came off my TBR, and I try and keep those numbers balanced. So I'm going to go through everything that happened throughout July, and along the way, as well as showing you my book haul and my reading wrap-ups, I'm also going to show you my latest Ana Luisa haul, because I have just officially partnered with Ana Luisa for another year. I am one of the Ana Luisa VIPs. I am a huge fan of this jewellery brand. And so in a minute I'm going to show you the latest jewellery that I've received from them. But let's kick off balancing the books. So as I said, I started with 46 unread books on my TBR. Let's see if I have managed to keep that number at that relatively sensible level. The first thing I did though was haul a book. This is Into the Dark by Fiona Cummins. I have read all of Fiona Cummins' books so far. She is a thriller author that is not afraid to get very dark, and that's why I really like her. Into the Dark sounds like it's going to be just as dark as the rest. This one's about a whole family who go missing, and this is discovered when the best friend of the mother arrives at the house ready for her weekly run with her friend to find that the kettle is still warm, phones are still plugged in charging, like the house looks totally lived in, but the whole family are gone. And scrawled on the mirror of the teenage daughter in her bedroom, there are 3 words written in blood: make them stop. From experience, I know that Fiona Cummins takes her books to a very dark, scary place, so I'm excited to see which dark, scary place she's going to take me to this time. I also hauled The Men. This is one that I was sent for a review from the publisher. I haven't yet read it, but I lent it instantly to Raf because she really likes this author and she really enjoyed it, so I'm excited to read this one next. This is a dystopian book where suddenly all of the men just vanish from the world, like in the middle of whatever it was they were doing. So suddenly like cars are crashing into each other, patients are on the operating table and suddenly there's no surgeon there, like pretty grisly stuff. The men just vanish, and it's about the aftermath of this. But also there are these weird chapters throughout where you get little glimpses of where the men might be. I have read a couple of books that revolve around the removal of men from the world. It's always a fun concept to see how the author plays it out. I didn't particularly love it in The End of Men. I didn't think that one worked very well. That was about a pandemic. This one I'm intrigued by because they literally just like vanish. So it's way more like science fiction-y. I think it's going to be weird. I think I'm going to enjoy it. And then I also hauled this ear cuff from Ana Luisa. Every single thing that I'm going to show you in this video from Ana Luisa, I really recommend that if you want to buy it, you click my link in the description box below. And I will tell you why. If you use my link, you will get a mystery discount. You will get at least 10% off whatever it is that you want to buy, but sometimes that discount might be higher. So it is really worth clicking my link to go and browse their full selection. Ana Luisa have such an amazing array of jewellery. The stock is changing all the time. They've always got amazing new designs, and they are a really high quality, sustainable jewellery brand who I am very honoured to keep working with. But let me show you this ear cuff that I chose. This is the Eleni ear cuff. If you were to buy this one full price, it would cost £29. If you use my link, it will be some amount less than that. This is actually a full lineup of Ana Luisa jewellery in my ear, and I think it looks great in a stack like that. And back to the books. The first book that I read in July was American Wife by Curtis Sittenfeld. So when I last gave you a Balancing the Books update, I was halfway through this one, and I said I could not wait to tell you about it when I was finished. And I did finally finish. The book took me a while because it is chunky, but I loved every second of this, and I was surprised that I did. The premise of this book is it's essentially based on Laura Bush, as in George Bush's wife. It's a fictionalized version of her story becoming married to the president. And based on that description, I would never have picked this book up. I didn't think that would be a story I was particularly interested in, but it was chosen by one of the members of my book club, so we all had to read it this month. And I'm so glad that I did. This is why being in a book club is so fun. I never would have picked this up and I loved it. It was quite fun for me reading this because I actually didn't know anything about Laura Bush's real story. So I was just reading this as a novel about a woman growing up. A big chunk of the book takes place before she even meets George Bush, who in this book is called Charlie Blackwell. So a huge chunk of it is her life before him, and even when they do meet and get married, there is a long time before he runs for president. In fact, his presidency is a very small bit at the end of the book. I was just loving reading about her story. The woman in this book is called Alice. That's the fictionalized version of Laura Bush. I was just loving reading about Alice's story, and I kept Googling things to find out if they were true, and most of the time it would turn out that yes, they were taken from Laura Bush's life. I don't know what this experience would have been like if I already knew Laura Bush's story better. I don't know if that would have added to it, but actually I loved it as it was. There's a lot of very sad things that happen to her in this story. You really warm to her as a character, and I know now, from having looked it up, that that's how a lot of people kind of felt about Laura Bush, is they sort of gave her this inner life and this backstory of her being this secret liberal who was really opposed to her husband's politics. And we do know that she didn't agree with him on abortion and on gay marriage. She was much more liberal than him in those regards. And I think that made her a very intriguing character to a lot of people. You know, the real Laura Bush, I think that made her a really intriguing character. Was she this sort of tortured liberal soul? But then why wasn't she standing up to her husband? And Alice Blackwell in this book goes through those same things. She's sort of put on a pedestal by the general public, but also torn down because they hold her responsible. Why hasn't she changed her husband's mind? Why didn't she stop him going to war? And her defense is, all I did was marry him. You're the ones that gave him power. She never wanted him to become president. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I really loved learning about her inner life and distancing her from Laura Bush. Actually, she doesn't need to be connected to a real figure. Curtis Sittenfeld has created a very interesting character, married to another very interesting character. I loved her writing. This is the second book of hers I've read, but the first one I read like way back when I was a teenager. I don't really remember it, but now I'm definitely going to read more of her. And now I'm going to show you my necklaces. I am wearing here the martini necklace, which is kind of perfect for a channel that revolves around drinking, even though this isn't a martini. That one is £58 if you get it full price. And I'm also wearing with it the mood pendant necklace, which is making me so nostalgic having a mood pendant. And it's amazing how much it changes. When I first took it out of the box, it was this gorgeous emerald colour, and I first put it on thinking it would match the martini glass. Then when I was getting ready to film, I looked down and it had gone this like amazing purple, and now it's a deep blue. Apparently my mood is all over the place, which sounds about right. The mood pendant necklace is £68 at full price. But again, click my link in the description box below and you will get at least 10% off these necklaces or whatever else it is that you want to buy. Next, I read 3 books in one weekend, and you can actually see a full vlog of me reading all 3 of these, which I will link to below. I spent a weekend reading 3 books. I read Assembly by Natasha Brown, which I thought was a really clever, beautifully done book that packed so much into very few words. It's a short book, but also the pages themselves they have a lot of space on them, so it's really very few words that she conveys a lot in. However, I think because of that, I sort of didn't enjoy it as much personally as I do when there's a book that I can really get lost in. You know, this is a book that took me weeks to read. This one took me an hour to read, and so my enjoyment of this one was overall going to be bigger. However, I did think this one was very clever. I read Thehundjin Murders by Seishi Yokomizo, which is a classic Japanese locked room mystery. It was a lot of fun reading it. I didn't love the ending. I also found, especially towards the end, it got a little bit repetitive to read. You're getting given a lot of information that I couldn't totally keep hold of in my brain. So I'm glad I read this one. It was really fun to read a Japanese classic, and I loved how many references there were in this book to other classic detective novels. It feels like a real immersion into an author who loves this kind of crime fiction. So that was a lot of fun, but it's not like a standout memory for me. And finally that weekend I read Stir Fry by Emma Donoghue, which I absolutely loved. This, I believe, is Emma Donoghue's first book, and it's about a young woman, a student, who goes off to Dublin and she has to find somewhere to live, so she ends up sharing a flat with 2 women who, it turns out, are in a relationship with each other, which to me reading it now was very obvious from the beginning, and to the reader is very obvious, but Mariah, our main character, does not figure that out straight away, and so the whole experience is this kind of awakening for her. It's a really lovely book. I think this would have meant a lot to me reading it younger. I loved reading it now. It was first published in 1994, so this book was around the whole time I was a teenager. I do wish I had read it. Ref recommended this one to me. She said that it was the first book for her that she read that was an It's Okay to Be Gay book, and I love that. Next, a little book haul. These two were presents from Raf. So when she went to Brighton for the weekend, she brought me The Trio by Johanna Hedman. This one sounds lovely. This is about 3 people, an unlikely trio, each who come from very different worlds. One of them from the urban elite, one is an art school dreamer, and one an ordinary boy from out of town. Over the course of 2 summers in Stockholm, they are drawn together magnetically. And then we also catch up with them years later and see where their lives have taken them and how they've been torn apart. Dual timelines, unlikely relationships. It's set between Berlin and Brighton and loads of other places. This has got a lot of the things I look for in a book. And this one is a proof of Girl Crush by Florence Given. So Florence Given is this feminist influencer. She's the author of Women Don't Owe You Pretty, which I haven't read, but I've heard lots about. But this is, I believe, her first novel. It's a novel all about women, our obsession with each other, that's another buzzword for me in a book, and what happens when we're crushed and reduced into the screens on our phones. Very relevant. Oh, and here on the title page it says, Girl Crush, a hot, dark story. Hello. Then I went on holiday and I brought some books with me. In fact, I brought lots of books with me and didn't read that many of them. I hauled Vladimir from the office and I read Vladimir. This is a very, very interesting book and a very controversial book, and I just loved the way that it made me think about things. It's got a main character who instantly I found very, very jarring to read from her perspective. So she is a professor, she's in her 50s, I think. She's married to a male professor at the same university, and he is currently under investigation for his relationships with students in the past. But they had always had this open marriage. She knew he was having affairs and she was kind of okay with it. And so now the fact that he is being hauled up as this example of an abuse of power, a lot of her students want to either be on her side to leave him, or they're vilifying her as well because they think she was complicit in it. This is putting her in a very uncomfortable position, and her response to it is so different from the commonly accepted one of the moment. So she kind of disapproves of the fact that these women are coming back so many years later and saying that they were being abused by her husband. She wants them to reclaim their own agency. She doesn't like the fact that the Me Too movement has given them this perspective that they were being abused. So, you see what I mean? Very controversial. So me reading her perspective on that, I found it really difficult to come to terms with, but I loved that. I loved that it makes you so uncomfortable and it forces you to rethink your own perspective. I don't necessarily mean to change your mind, but I mean, I'm so used to talking to other people who agree with me, and so it's interesting having to go back to your own beliefs and actually, argue their case rather than just taking them for granted. You have to figure out, why is it that I think she's wrong about what she's saying? And not everything that she said in this book I did think was wrong. I think she's a great character. She has a lot of really interesting points. So it's just a very morally complex book, which I loved. It goes completely chaotic towards the end of the book. The decisions that she makes were not what I expected her to do, because alongside this trial, that's just one part of the story. The other is her becoming completely obsessed with a sexy new author who has come to the campus, and her obsession takes her to an interesting place. I feel like this would be a good book clubby book because there's a lot to discuss in it. I also hauled from the office Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney, and I did read that one. Now, this book didn't particularly work for me, but I've spoken to so many people at work, influencers I've been working with, who loved this one. That's actually something that I find really, really fun, is talking about a book that maybe wasn't my favourite book, but that I genuinely think a lot of you will enjoy, because different books have different readers, and that's okay. The fact this one wasn't for me, I genuinely think a lot of you will love this one. So this is an Agatha Christie-inspired story. It's about this dysfunctional family who reunite for a birthday party, for the grandmother's birthday party, in this house on an island that, when the tide comes in, is completely cut off from the mainland. So overnight they are stuck there with no escape, and one by one members of the family start being killed. So far, so, and then there were none. And I absolutely loved And Then There Were None. But there are lots of twists to this book. You get a lot of flashbacks to the family's past, and I did not see where all of that was going. And then there is one major twist that happens that I definitely did not see coming and will be divisive in a great way. I don't want to give any kind of hint to it at all, because I think if you're going to love the twist, it should come out of nowhere. I feel like Alice Feeney was having a lot of fun while writing this book, and you can really tell. The final book that I read on holiday was one that I'd already had on my TBR for a while, and that is Small Pleasures by Clare Chambers. And I loved this one. This was 5 stars. It's set in the 50s in London. It's about a journalist called Jean who lives with her mother. She's never been married. She's in her 40s, and she lives this sort of quiet life, enjoying small pleasures, as the title will tell you. She works at a newspaper, but she's generally given sort of women's filler pieces to write. But then a letter comes into the newspaper from a woman who claims that her daughter was born without the involvement of any man. So essentially that her daughter was a virgin birth. And Jean is given this story to go investigate. So Jean then meets Gretchen, this woman who claims that her daughter was born 10 years ago without any involvement from a man. And it's a pretty convincing story, because actually at the point where she would have had to get pregnant, she was confined to a hospital. She was very, very ill at that point, and she spent months in this girls' hospital. So how could she have been getting pregnant? I loved the mystery of trying to figure out what had actually happened in Gretchen's past. I loved the relationships that build between Jean and the family. She becomes very close with Gretchen, her husband Howard, and her daughter Margaret, this apparent miracle. It was one of those books that I just wanted to be reading all the time. I was so excited. We'd go out on the boat on our holiday, go out for lunch, be swimming in the sea, having this amazing time, but I was like excited to just go back and dive back into my book because it was so wonderfully written. It's had a controversial ending. I was warned before picking this up that a lot of people hated the ending. I didn't hate the ending at all, because I knew the ending was coming from the beginning, because it does tell you. And often when reading books, I would just forget that kind of thing and then be shocked again. But because everyone had been talking so much about the ending, I didn't forget the big clue that it gives you at the beginning. And that worked well for me, not forgetting. So the whole way through I knew something was coming. I didn't know exactly what form it would take. And so when it got there, I thought the form it did take was really amazing, actually. There's 2 major storylines that fit together in a very clever way, and I really recommend reading the afterword, because I noticed even more there about why she chose these 2 stories to link. Of all the books I read in July, that's got to be my top recommendation. That's going to be one of my favourites of the year. On the plane home from my holiday, I read The Love of My Life by Rosie Walsh. Had this one as a proof for ages. It had already come out in June. I finally read it. This is the second book by Rosie Walsh. I really enjoy her writing because she writes these books that blur the lines between romances and mysteries. They're written as thrillers, as suspense novels, but the stories are about like truly domestic situations, more dramatic than anything that's ever happened to me before. But the mystery isn't who murdered this person, it's why is your wife lying to you? At least that is the premise of The Love of My Life, which is about a married couple called Emma and Leo. But when Emma becomes very ill, Leo starts looking into writing her life story, and he discovers some things that don't add up and realises that she has lied to him about basically every single thing about who she is, including her name. We go back and forth between the 2 perspectives, and we know that Emma really does love Leo. She's not lying for sinister reasons, and we have to uncover the truth of her past and what made her have to create this whole new identity and what she is hiding from. And I really did not see the different twists coming. I thought it was really, really clever the way everything fit together. Then I hauled a book, which is so new I haven't even opened it yet. This was a book I was sent by the publisher. I'm going to open it right now. It's in some very pretty pink paper, and it is All This Could Be Different by Sarah Thankam Matthews. So this comes out in August, comes out this month. So this is a book about being young, about not having enough money, about being an immigrant, having all these expectations on you. It's about friends who become your family, and it's a novel about how all this could be different. And I love this quote on the front. This is not a story about work or precarity. I am trying, late in the evening, to say something about love, which for many of us is not separable from the other shit. This sounds great. And finally, I hauled briefly A Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. This is another one that I brought home from the office. Just over halfway through this one now, so again, I will wait until next month to give you a full wrap-up of this, but I'm loving it. It's a book narrated by a ghost. It's set in Mallorca in, what year is it? 1838, and don't let this put you off. It is about the true story of the time that Chopin, the musician, and his lover George, who is a woman who wears men's clothing, and her 2 children, they spent this summer in a monastery in Mallorca, and it was this disastrous summer. And I knew nothing about that true story, very little about Chopin at all. I don't even know how to pronounce his name properly, that's how little I know about him. And so I wasn't sure that this book was going to be for me, but it turns out it doesn't matter at all. I'm sure if you know more about the characters, that might add a certain something, but not knowing about them is delightful, and I'm adoring this book. This perspective, the story being narrated by a ghost, the ghost of a teenage girl who I don't yet know how she died, I don't think it's going to be a nice story, and she now haunts this monastery, and she's been there for centuries and seen all sorts of terrible and wonderful stories of the lives of people that have come through. Her voice is incredible. I want every book to be narrated by her. Side note, when I read Small Pleasures, there is in here a lesbian love story that I hadn't seen coming. I'm not going to tell you who it is between, but it appears at some point during the book. And one of my colleagues who read this book was like, oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen because the book has oranges on the cover. And oranges are a lesbian fruit. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? But now currently, this is the second book I'm reading this month, which has orange on the cover and is narrated by a bisexual ghost. So is this a thing? Is this a theory? Do all books with oranges on the cover have sapphic love stories in them? I want more examples. Are oranges, after all, the only lesbian fruit? As you will see from the numbers I've been tracking on the screen, I hauled 8 books this month and I read 8 books this month, which means that my books are officially balanced. I am now very, very warm and need to go stand in front of the fan for several minutes. But I want to remind you once again that I am wearing these gorgeous Ana Luisa pieces, and if you want to be wearing something similar, then you should click the link in my description box below that will get you at least 10% off whatever Ana Luisa jewellery you would like. Let me know in the comments below the best books that you have read over the last month, or if you've read any of these and you agree with me or disagree with me on my opinions, and I will see you next time.
Like your smile in the morning.